Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you a treat, and it is Trent's Own Case by E.C. Bentley. This is copyright 1936 by Knopf. And you know what? I also would like to show you just the book itself. It's always nice to look at these old books. And in the back here, see there in the lower corner, you see it's a Borzoi book, which the Borzoi breed of dog was associated with the publisher Alfred A. Knopf, who kept them and brought them into the office not infrequently. His Borzois were not known for being delightful. As I understand it, they're a rather refined but somewhat high-strung, one might even say snotty dog. I was always really fascinated by them, but I only ever met one in person once. There was a man outside a shopping center with this beautiful, silky white dog, very, very thin, like greyhound thin. And you could tell most of its weight was in its hair. And I said to the guy, what is that? I've never seen anything like it. And he told me it was a Borzoi, and he told me about some of the joys and challenges of raising a Borzoi. The biggest challenge of which is they really don't do anything they don't want to do. But they're not also the most energetic. So what they like to do is kind of lie around a lot. But that's, you can see here on the spine too, the Borzoi. So kind of nice to see a publisher put his own kind of imprint on his publishing house. It's just a really, really nice touch. And of course, Knopf is one of the greats. So let me tell you a little bit about E.C. Bentley first and his history, and then we will get into the book. So E.C. Bentley was an Englishman, and he is known for his character, the artist Philip Trent, who, also, like so many an amateur sleuth, just every so often gets involved in solving a crime. And Trent showed up mostly in short stories, but in two full-length novels, of which this one, Trent's Own Case, is the second. The first one is called Trent's Last Case, ironically, because it's not his last case. And it is considered widely, I mean, this is among all sorts of disparate critics, to be one of the great mysteries of all time. And I have a copy of it. I have a first edition of it that I want to show you, but I cannot locate it among the bookshelves. It's here somewhere, but I can't find it. But I'm very happy to own that book because, its reputation precedes itself. And, in the same way everybody kind of knows what Agatha Christie did in the murder of Roger Ackroyd, they know what E.C. Bentley did in Trent's Last Case, which was the whole first half of the book is, the murder and the investigation, and then the detective about halfway through the book laying it all out for everybody about how the motives and the MO and how it was all done. And, he finished his story, and everybody thinks, okay, well, that's a satisfying conclusion. And then it turns out he's completely wrong about everything. And so the book gets retold and reinvestigated until finally at the very end of the book, you find out really what happened. A work of genius, really. I hate to say you must read it because, I think everybody reads what they want. And, the only time you really should be told what to read is in college or school in general. But if you're looking to really dig into the history of the mystery and some of the books that really made the largest impact on the genre, I think it's well worth looking into and reading E.C. Bentley's Trent's Last Case. Honestly, it's a little bit better than Trent's Own Case, but this book is good, and I will get into it. But definitely the book to start with if you want to learn more about Bentley, is Trent's Last Case. The other interesting thing about Bentley, a little literary history, is he was the inventor of a poetic form called the Clerihew, and that comes from his middle name, Edwin Clerihew Bentley. And a Clerihew is basically a 4-line poem with the rhyme scheme AABB. And its gimmick, or its shtick, is that it has to name a famous person in the first line and kind of encapsulate them or their lives in just these 4 witty, poetic lines. And so I printed out a couple to read you guys because I think they're pretty funny. But I think I need the old glasses for this. So here's one of them. Geoffrey Chaucer took a bath in a saucer. He never felt clean until he was 15. Another that I particularly like. The people of Spain think Cervantes equal to half a dozen Dantes, an opinion resented most bitterly by the people of Italy. And this last one. Henry James, whatever his other claims, is not always too deuced lucid. Okay. So clearly a man of wit and erudition and a sense of humor. I read a little bit about his life, and that in his own life and his own reading, he wasn't hugely a fan of Sherlock Holmes because he thought he took himself too seriously. And when he created Trent, he wanted to create a character who knew how to laugh and have fun and have conversations and relationships. And so he definitely achieves that with his Trent character. So the way Trent's Last Case was published in 1913. And like I said, it was a cause célèbre and really made his reputation for life. And then 23 years later, in 1936, he published the second full-length novel, which we are talking about today. So that's quite a big gap in time. I guess he felt like he had one more big one in him before he went off to the big hunting grounds in the sky. And he shares credit with, as you can see here, H. Warner Allen. So I did a little bit of research into what Allen's role in this book was. And it was mostly as a researcher and expert on wines and champagnes and on the European continent. And Bentley was just such a gracious man that he gave him co-authorship credit, even though Bentley himself did the writing, the plotting, all what we think of as the heavy lifting of writing. Although I don't want to diminish research as a time-consuming aspect of writing. I had to do historical research for one of my own books, and it took forever. And you can really just go down a rabbit hole doing that kind of research. At some point, you have to start to write. Excuse me. But that shows you the kind of man E.C. Bentley was. So let's talk about the plot a little bit, and then we'll get into some of the critical analysis. So the victim here is James Randolph, and he is a Londoner who also lives in Yorkshire. Yorkshire is his home, but he has a place in London, one of these small houses on a mews, and he is a widower and a very, very wealthy man. He made his money in real estate, and in his later years has become very much a philanthropist and really supports a lot of very good quality nonprofits or charitable organizations. One of them is sort of like a youth center for boys, so they have a place to go and learn sports and do all that kind of thing. And kind of like a precursor in the United States to the Boys Club or the Boys and Girls Club. And he also funds a mental institution, a hospital called the Randolph Institute, and funds research into psychological disorders, and is a mainstay of a lot of charities. And so he is found dead by his manservant, a guy by the name of Raught, Raught, and he was killed in a rather cowardly way. He was shot in the back, and so they find his his body, he's crumpled face down. He's been shot in the back, so not quite execution style, but almost. And Trent just happens to be there, in the vicinity, and he is friendly with the chief inspector on the case, Gideon Bly. And Bly and he have worked together in the past, and so Trent's like, yeah, why not? I'll help you out again. I've got things to do between painting portraits of people and landscapes and all those other things, because he's a pretty well-regarded artist as well. Excuse me. And so Trent goes about his business, and it's this time it's personal, because one of the clues found in the murdered man's home is he's got kind of a pocket full of notions, the stuff that men carry around, like handkerchiefs and wallets. And among them are a cork from a bottle of wine, and also a package of straight razor blades. And turns out that there's a beautiful fingerprint on one of the blades, and it turns out to be Trent's fingerprint. So he automatically feels like he's kind of sucked into this case, and how did his fingerprint get on this razor blade and all that other stuff. And so he goes around, like so many amateur sleuths, just asking questions, listening carefully. And that is really the key to his success as an investigator, is that he listens and observes very carefully, and he's very good about detecting minute differences in stories that point to people lying or withholding part of the truth, or he's just really a good observer. So I guess that's in sync with what we think of being a characteristic of a good artist, right? Is that they have to really observe. If you're painting a portrait, you have to get that person's character right there in their face, really interesting, like see the work that portraitists have done and how subversive it can be. I read a book about portraits and self-portraits a number of years ago, and wow, they are so telling. And half the time, the sitter doesn't even know what the artist is saying about him or her. Fascinating part of art history and even art today, right? This is going to sound a little conceited. I wonder how a portrait artist would paint me. Who's to say? If any, really famous artists wish to do that, feel free to contact me, and I'm sure we can arrange a sitting. Part of, I don't want to get too much into the plot, but it turns out that a pretty close friend of Trent's, his name is, let me look at my cheat sheet. His name is Brian Fairman, Dr. Brian Fairman. He works at the Randolph Institute, and he has been fired despite being very devoted to his job and very good at what he does. And his identity is so wrapped up in what he does for a living that he can't quite handle being fired. And he does some strange things, like he takes a train so that he can take a boat across the English Channel into France, and he does some investigating in France, but no one knows what for. So then he tries to die by suicide on the trip back by throwing himself into the English Channel, but he's caught by a policeman who then arrests him, because apparently it is a crime to try to kill yourself in England at that time. And he's Fairman is sort of throughout the book, I guess you would say, in kind of a psychotic break or a mental break, that he can't really talk or tell his side of the story cogently. And that's an important part of the plot, because he has a lot of really important information to give. And Bentley had to find a way to have Trent not speak to him until very late in the book, because he should have been the first person spoken to, but because of his mental issues, he was not able to be spoken to. If Trent had spoken to him first, this book would be a lot shorter. So, authorial license, they have the right to craft their plot the way they want. Sometimes I feel like when an author has, the key witness or the key person who knows what's going on conveniently out of town for 90% of the book, or on vacation, or unreachable, I don't think it's the most clever way of plotting a book, but it works fine here. And that's the story of the book. Trent investigates with his friend from Scotland Yard, Gideon Bly. I've wondered if J.J. Marrick used Gideon Bly's first name as inspiration for his own character, Inspector Gideon, in the Gideon series by J.J. Marrick. That's just speculation. I don't know. But they work together and they kind of divide up the tasks, and Trent sort of follows his muse, or his nose, his investigator's nose, which is good. And eventually, as I said before, by really listening closely and really looking at things, and weighing different options in his head, and following the path of clues that are very carefully laid out in the book, he brings our murderer to justice. And it's a pretty good surprise, it was to me. And then when Bentley or Trent does his postmortem, gathering the cast and explaining his train of thought, it all made plenty of sense to me, and it caused me to see things that I hadn't necessarily seen. Sometimes I'm not the best at picking up on tiny details in a manuscript, which is ironic, because in my job as an editor, I can pick up on teeny weeny details, but I read at night before bed, maybe when I'm a little tired, so I'm not always great with picking up on the, little tiny atomic-sized details, but Trent is, and that's the key to his success as an investigator. So let me tell you what I liked about this book. The first is that it's very urbane. It takes part in London for the most part, and then in Dieppe, France, which is made out to be this sort of quirky little town, and you really feel like you're in the presence of a storyteller, a raconteur, right? That Bentley is in no rush to tell his story. When you pick up the book, what you sort of picture is sitting in your favorite chair by the fire with your legs up and just reading it at a leisurely pace, enjoying the language, enjoying the characters. In a way, it's almost Dickensian that way. You know how Charles Dickens was just fantastic with character and quirky characters and really making you care about them? Bentley had that talent as well. I also liked how he scratches below the surface. This isn't really a spoiler, but I guess, part of any murder investigation is investigating the victim and what he was all about, what his life was like. And it turns out that Randolph, even though he was philanthropic and very generous, he was also extremely mean and vain and manipulative, and sort of every charitable gift came with strings attached. And so while you start out feeling kind of neutral about about Randolph. He's just another murdered rich guy. He becomes more unlikable with every page, and I thought that was interesting to sort of uncover his meanness, which, let's just say, plays a role in the motive for the murder here. So I liked that sort of unraveling of the character, and I like the writing. It's intelligent, it's pleasant. The pacing is nice. You're not going to fly through the book. It's not that kind of book, but it's like I said, if you want to light up your pipe and sit back with a good read, I think this book you will really enjoy. Very, very English, with some true English characters like Trent's Aunt Judith, who's quirky old lady. He calls her Aunt Jew. Here's something curious. Trent is married. Trent is married to a woman named Mabel, who he met in his first book, and but you never see them together except in one chapter. And he also has a 6-year-old son who isn't even named, so it doesn't feel like Trent is overly involved with his wife and his child. And kind of hard to imagine today, right, where people are so focused on their children, right, and their children get so much attention. Bentley can't even bother to tell us the kid's name. So I thought that was a little funny, and quite a difference between a book written in the 1930s and a book written today. Kids would have a much larger role today. Excuse me. I think the book is a good length. It doesn't go on too long, and it's a satisfying mystery, just not brilliant in the way that Trent's Last Case was. So I think, when you break the mold like that, it's really going to be hard to come back for an encore, right? Like Harper Lee with To Kill a Mockingbird. He had really his own big shoes to fill, and he did a very creditable job. But like I said, it's just not Trent's Last Case. The things that I found a little bit less, that I liked a little bit less, let's just put it that way, is there's a certain type of Noel Coward character who receives everything said to him and then responds with either a quote from poetry or something meant to be light, airy, and ironic. That sort of light-hearted conversationalist thing. Now, I think there's a time and a place for that, right? Everybody likes delightful people. But it gets a little old. It's almost like if you know a person who's very sarcastic, they can throw out some killer one-liners, but you don't want also sarcasm all the time. Trent is a little bit too much of a poetry reciter, classical Greece referencer, a little bit of a show off my knowledge kind of guy, but not ever in a mean or conceited way. It's just the way the character is drawn. He's likable, but sometimes I wished that you could just get a straight answer out of him instead of something, with, quotes in Greek from Homer. In fact, I think that you can see, facing the front page, there's an actual excerpt from the Odyssey in the original Greek. But that's okay. I mean, it's just, it's a character quirk, and he's certainly likable, and he's a good friend, and he's got good morality, and he has his own reputation at stake here too, because he's got a clue that's kind of, like I mentioned before, tied into him with the fingerprint. And that's really the only thing that I could say that did not thrill me. There's a female character in here. Her name is Eunice Faviel, and she is related somehow to the murdered man, and she's an actress. And the funniest thing about these English novels written in this period is, you know, ever since the stage became a thing in England, men used to play women's parts, in Elizabethan days. But ever since women went on the stage as actresses, talk about a polarizing career, right? Every every man loves an actress, right? Because they're over the top and, not afraid to be sexy or to put themselves out there and to be dramatic. And so men love these actresses. Women do not. There's a social sigma associated with being an actress. You're never going to get invited to the great country estates or to the best parties because you're a whore. I mean, that's basically the way people thought about actresses. But when you read books with actresses, from this era, the actresses, they're always fun and outspoken and funny and witty and more self-aware than you give them credit for. So while the society women are looking down their noses at the actresses, the men and the readers are having a great time because they typically are such good characters, and that's the case with Eunice here too. In fact, Eunice ends up staying. She's friends with Trent's wife, and she escapes to Yorkshire because she needs a few days away. And when Trent goes home, Eunice sees him and she says, Trent, I'm here to escape from the world. Please go away. She tries to throw him out of his own house. I got a big kick out of that. The only other thing I would say is that I found the ending, the exposure of the murderer to be maybe a little melodramatic. I don't know that psychologically it really worked 100%. Maybe it worked like maybe 85 or 90%. It was done cleverly, and certainly we've seen this done in the movies as well. Not something that really would hold up to close scrutiny in the real world. Like, to me, that was the part of the book that felt the most kind of constructed and mystery-y, right? And that it's something that you would see in the pages of a book, maybe, rather than something that would really happen in real life. But hey, this is fiction. That's what we read it for, right? This is, to put our troubles aside and to just have a good time. And I believe you will indeed have a good time with Trent's Own Case. Also just wanted to show you this first edition. So I'm really, of course, always delighted to have a first edition. I just want to show you, I don't know if I'll be able to see. You can see the paper. The paper has all the signs of aging on it, right? And I don't know why. Instead of that disconcerting me, it just tickles my fancy in the biggest way to really feel like I'm reading a book that someone in 1936 was holding and enjoying, and that survived all these years. I mean, we're going on 100 years pretty soon, in beautiful shape, with the jacket intact, and I'm a geek about this stuff. I suspect some of my viewers are too. Another funny thing is here on the back there's an advertisement for The Barotique Mystery by George Harmon Cox, another long-running, very successful writer. And it's funny, here at the bottom of that little blurb it says, with this book, Mr. Cox definitely takes a place among the best of the newer murder mystery writers. So that was 1936, and Cox went on for like 50 plus more years after that. So this is when they were launching his career, and I'm always just so impressed and humbled by people who can write novel after novel for 50 years and keep them good. And Cox was really a good writer. Check out one of my reviews on here of one of his books called, I think it was called The Invisible Man. So that's all I've got for you tonight. I don't know how long this video is going on, but it is what it is. I'm going to close by asking you a question and asking you to weigh in on something. So I recently made a video, and I was shocked by the time I clicked the stop button to see that it was 45 minutes long. Much too long for a video for this channel, I think, right? I don't want to oversell my welcome. It's a book titled In the Death of a Man by Leslie Egan, who was also known as Del Shannon. And this is a writer that I find very confounding, very hard to sort of put a finger on. Her books generate so much thought because her approach to fiction was sort of so different, and her approach to writing about the police was so kind of precise. And really, I think a lot of people would argue that the books don't age well, but they were very successful in their time. You know, she had, Del Shannon had been, I think she won an Edgar and maybe was nominated for 2 more, or maybe she was nominated, but her book sold. But you don't really hear much about her anymore. And I read this book and I thought, well, I really would love to just sort of talk with my viewers about her. But I went on way too long. Like I said, the video is 45 minutes, and I thought, you know, I don't want to overexpose myself, you know, like, just, Steve, maybe you shouldn't love the sound of your own voice so much that you're willing to blather on for 45 minutes. That said, if anybody's gotten to this part of the video and they would like me to post that, I will. Just let me know below, and I will post it with a warning that it's only for people who have long attention spans or who want to fall asleep to the monotonous droning of my voice for 45 minutes. It could be like video Sominex. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching. I enjoyed making the video. Let's show you Trent's Own Case one last time. And also that weird blue dot on my hand was made with a Sharpie. It's been there for 3 days. I can't get it off. I think it's going to be there till I die. So cautionary tale for when you're using Sharpies. Okay, thanks again. Have a good night.